The silver ships came down from the sky like giant teardrops made of light. Dr. Kim Soo-jin pressed her face against the thick glass window of the space station, watching the alien vessels move into position above Earth's biggest cities. Each ship was the size of a football stadium, but they moved through the air as smoothly as fish swimming through water. "I can't believe this is really happening," she whispered to her friend Dr. Park Jinwoo, who was floating beside her in the zero gravity. "First contact with aliens, and we're seeing it happen right now." Park nodded, his eyes wide with wonder. "Listen to their voices," he said, pointing to the speakers that carried the alien broadcasts. The voices were like music, speaking perfect English, Chinese, Spanish, and dozens of other human languages. They talked about peace, friendship, and working together to make both their peoples better, far below on Earth. In a military building in Washington, Colonel Lee Dong-ho was not feeling the same wonder. He stood in front of a wall of computer screens, showing the positions of all the alien ships. His hands were clenched into fists, and his jaw was tight with worry. "They're saying they come in peace," said one of the young officers next to him. "Then why are their ships positioned like they're planning to attack?" Lee replied, his voice sharp. "Look at these patterns. They're not here for a friendly visit. They're positioned to watch every major city, every military base, every important target we have." The aliens called themselves the Valthians. "Were tall and beautiful, with skin that seemed to be made of pearl and changed colors like a rainbow when they moved. Their leader, who said his name was Veltar, appeared on every television screen on Earth. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with long flowing hair that moved like it was underwater. When he smiled, his teeth were white as snow. "People of Earth," Veltar said in his musical voice, "we have traveled across the stars to meet you. We have watched your world from afar and seen that you are ready to join the greater community of intelligent beings in the universe." The crowds in the streets cheered. Children held up signs welcoming the aliens. World leaders lined up to shake hands with the Valthian representatives who came down from their ships in small, glowing pods. But Colonel Lee noticed things that others missed. The aliens' scanning beams weren't just looking at the pretty parts of Earth, they were mapping every tunnel, every bunker, every place where humans might hide. They were counting how many people lived in each city, studying the patterns of daily life, learning about human weaknesses. "They're not here to be friends," Lee said to his second in command, Major Kim Tae-ho. "They're here to study us. Like we're lab rats." Up in space, Dr. Kim Soo-jin was given the honor of being part of the first scientific team to meet with the Valthians. When she entered their ship, she was amazed by how clean and bright everything was. The walls seemed to glow with their own light, and strange symbols flowed across surfaces like living writing. The Valthian scientist who met her was named Zaline. She was even more beautiful than the others, with skin that sparkled like diamonds and eyes that seemed to hold the depth of the ocean. "Your species is fascinating," Zaline told Dr. Kim in perfect Korean. "We have studied many worlds, but Earth is special. Your people have such strong life force, such perfect genetic patterns." Dr. Kim felt proud to hear this, but something about the way Zaline said it made her uncomfortable. It was like the way a farmer might talk about good breeding stock. The Valthians offered amazing gifts to humanity. They showed machines that could make unlimited clean energy, medicines that could cure any disease, and technology that could let humans travel to the stars. All they asked in return was to be allowed to build research stations on Earth, and to study human culture more closely. World leaders fell over themselves to say yes. The President of the United States, the leaders of China, Russia, and every other major nation signed agreements allowing the Valthians to establish bases on every continent. They promised to share their technology freely and to help humanity join the galactic community. But down in the Pentagon, Colonel Lee was putting together a secret team of people who shared his doubts. Dr. Yoon Mina, a biologist from Seoul, had been studying the tissue samples the Valthians provided. She found made her blood run cold. "These aren't the cells of peaceful plant eaters," she told Lee over an encrypted video call. "These are the cells of predators, of parasites. They're lying about what they are." Lee felt his worst fears being confirmed. "Keep studying," he told her, "and keep this information secret." I have a feeling we're going to need proof of what they really are. As the weeks passed, the Valthians built their research stations with incredible speed. Their buildings rose from the ground like growing plants, made of materials that seemed to be alive. They smiled and spoke of friendship, but Lee noticed that their buildings were always positioned to control important roads, water supplies, and communication lines. The trap was being set, but most of humanity was too dazzled by the aliens' beauty and promises to see it closing around them, deep. Underground in a secret bunker beneath Seoul, Dr. Yoon Mina stood before a group of worried faces. The room was lit only by the blue glow of computer screens showing terrible information. Colonel Lee Dong-ho sat at the head of the table, his face dark with anger as he listened to what she had discovered. "This isn't the first time, Dr. Yoon," said her voice shaking. "The Valthians have done this before. 17 times before." She pressed a button, and the holographic display showed images of dead worlds, planets that had once been full of life, but were now empty and silent. Captain Choi, Hyeon-sik, a soldier who had seen many battles, felt sick as he looked at the pictures. Each world showed the same story. Beautiful aliens arrived speaking of peace and friendship. They offered wonderful technology and promised to help the people of each planet. Then, after a few months or years, the entire population disappeared. Like giant locusts, Dr. Yoon continued. They move from world to world, eating everything alive, then move on to the next planet. We found records of civilizations that were thousands of years old, wiped out in just a few years. Major Kim Tae-ho leaned forward. "How do we know this? Information is real?" Dr. Yoon showed them computer files she had stolen from a Valthian research station. The aliens had been careless, thinking humans were too primitive to understand their technology. But Dr. Yoon had spent weeks learning their computer systems, and what she found was a complete record of their crimes. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a section of the display. "They've been building things under our cities, not research stations like they told us. These are ... processing centers. It's places where they plan to keep humans like cattle." Colonel Lee's hands clenched into fists. "Processing centers for what?" "For breeding," Dr. Yoon said quietly. "They're not just going to kill us. They're going to use us to make more of themselves." While the resistance met in secret, the Valthians began giving their gift to humanity. They called it the life extension treatment, and they said it would help humans live for 200 years instead of just 80. People lined up in every city to receive the injection, grateful for this amazing present from their new alien friends. But up in the space station, Dr. Park Jin-woo was watching something terrible happen. The humans who had received the treatment were changing. At first, the changes were small. They became calmer, more agreeable, less likely to argue or fight. But then Dr. Park noticed physical changes too. Their bodies were becoming different in ways that made them more suitable for the Valthians' evil purposes. "They're not trying to help us live longer," Dr. Park said in a secret message to Dr. Yoon. "They're changing us into something else, something that will be easier for them to control and use." The resistance tried to warn the world about what was really happening. They sent messages to every news station, every government, every military base they could reach. But when they tried to broadcast their evidence, they found that the Valthians had already taken control of Earth's communication systems. Instead of their warning being heard, the resistance members were labeled as terrorists and crazy people. The news said they were trying to destroy the peaceful relationship between Earth and the Valthians. Police and military forces that had been influenced by the alien treatment began hunting down resistance members. Captain Choi barely escaped. When soldiers came to arrest him at his home, Dr. Yoon had to hide in abandoned subway tunnels beneath Seoul. Colonel Lee watched helplessly as many of his best people were captured and taken to the Valthian processing centers. Then, on a Tuesday morning that would be remembered forever, the Valthians decided they no longer needed to pretend. It started in London. A Valthian diplomat was giving a speech about friendship and cooperation when his beautiful pearl-like skin began to crack and fall away. Underneath was something horrible, a creature that looked like a giant spider crossed with a jellyfish, its wet tentacles writhing as it spoke with the same musical voice. "The deception phase is now complete," the creature announced. its voice still beautiful, but now terrifying. Begin collection of the breeding stock. All around the world, the elegant Valthian forms revealed themselves as biomechanical suits worn by parasitic creatures. Their ships, no longer trying to look peaceful, began dropping down into cities and releasing swarms of smaller vessels that rounded up humans like sheep. The aliens' technology was far beyond anything humans had. Air weapons could put entire city blocks to sleep with a single pulse. Their ships could appear and disappear at will. Military forces that tried to fight back were quickly overwhelmed by technology that seemed like magic. Dr. Park watched from the space station as the cities of Earth were covered in glowing nets that the Valthians used to capture humans. Millions of people were herded into the processing centers that had been built in secret beneath their own cities. "This is really happening," he whispered to himself as he watched his home planet being conquered. "They're actually doing it." The Valthians had expected humanity to be like the other 17 species, shocked, afraid, and quickly defeated. But they had never encountered humans before. They'd never met a species that could be driven to absolute fury when cornered. They had never faced beings who could turn their own desperation into a weapon more terrible than any alien technology. The real war was about to begin. The Valthians made their first big mistake when they thought humans would give up easily. In hidden bunkers scattered across the world, Colonel Lee Dong-ho and his resistance fighters were not giving up. They were getting angrier, and angry humans were dangerous humans. "I think we're like sheep," Colonel Lee said to his team. They gathered in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath Seoul. "But sheep don't bite back. We do." The resistance had been studying the aliens' technology for weeks, looking for weaknesses. Dr. Yoon Minna, working with broken equipment in a hidden lab, made an important discovery. All of the Valthians' amazing technology was connected by invisible signals that traveled faster than light. If they could find a way to break these connections, the aliens' weapons and ships would stop working. "It's like a spider web," Dr. Yoon explained to the others. "Cut the right thread, and the whole web falls apart." Major Kim Taho, a soldier who had fought in many dangerous missions, volunteered to lead a team into one of the Valthian ships. It was almost certainly a suicide mission. But they needed to know more about their enemy. On a dark night when the alien ships were parked above the ruins of Seoul, Kim and his team used stolen Valthian technology to sneak aboard one of the massive vessels. The inside of the ship was like a nightmare. The walls were covered with organic material that pulsed like a heartbeat, and the air smelled of death and decay. What they found inside made Kim's blood run cold. The Valthians had kept detailed records of every species they had destroyed. There were videos of the genocides, showing how each civilization had been wiped out. Kim watched in horror as he saw footage of beautiful alien cities being turned into processing centers, their inhabitants being herded like cattle. 17 civilizations, Kim whispered into his radio. All of them gone, all of them murdered. But the worst discovery was yet to come. The Valthians had detailed plans for humanity's future. They were going to keep some humans alive to breed. More humans, treating them like farm animals. Others would be used as living factories to create more Valthian parasites. The aliens had already started this process in their hidden facilities beneath Earth's cities. Kim's team found rooms full of human prisoners who had been changed by the aliens' treatments. These people were no longer quite human. They moved. Slowly, their eyes were empty, and they seemed to exist only to serve their alien masters. Some were being used as incubators for young Valthians, their bodies slowly being consumed from the inside. "We have to stop this," Kim said, his voice shaking with rage. "We have to kill every last one of them." As Kim's team escaped with their stolen information, Dr. Yoon was making her own breakthrough in her hidden laboratory. She had been studying the genetic weapon the Valthians had used to make humans more obedient. But Dr. Yoon discovered something the aliens didn't know there. Weapon could be turned around and used against them. "They're parasites," she explained to Colonel Lee over a secure radio channel. "Their bodies are not really their own. They depend on other creatures to survive. That makes them vulnerable to the right kind of biological weapon." Realized that the Valthians had made a crucial error. All of their previous victims had been peaceful civilizations that tried to fight back with conventional weapons, ships, bombs, and energy weapons. These civilizations had been advanced, but gentle, and they had never faced an enemy that would use biological warfare. But humans were different. Humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other, had learned to be creative, ruthless, and adaptable. They'd used poison gas, deadly diseases, and psychological warfare. They had learned to fight dirty when their survival was at stake. The other species they destroyed were too civilized. Colonel Lee said to his gathered commanders, "They fought fair. They tried to be honorable. That's why they lost." Captain Choi Hyansik, who had been coordinating attacks on Valthian facilities, nodded grimly. "We're not going to make that mistake. We're going to fight like the survival of our species depends on it, because it does." Dr. Yoon worked day and night to create a biological weapon that would target the Valthians' parasitic nature. She used their own genetic modifications against them, creating a virus that would spread through their quantum communication network like wildfire. Meanwhile, the resistance scientists were working on ways to disrupt the aliens' technology. They had discovered that the Valthians' quantum networks could be overloaded with the right kind of electromagnetic pulse. If they could build enough of these weapons, they could shut down the aliens' ships and weapons all at once. The resistance also made another important discovery. The Valthians had grown overconfident after destroying 17 civilizations. They had become lazy and careless. They didn't expect their victims to fight back effectively, so they had left weaknesses in their defenses. "I think we're primitives," Major Kim reported after returning from his mission. "They think we're too stupid to understand their technology. It's going to be their downfall." As the resistance prepared their counterattack, they received a message from other parts of the world. Human survivors in every country were organizing, sharing information, and preparing to fight back. The Valthians had expected to face scattered, frightened victims. Instead, they were about to face an entire species that had been pushed too far. The aliens were about to learn that humans were not like the other species they had destroyed. Humans were the species that fought back hardest when cornered. That became most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was ready to show the Valthians what happened when they picked on the wrong species. The resistance had a new name now, the Terran Liberation Front. Colonel Lee stood in the main command center. They had built in an abandoned mine deep underground. Around him, hundreds of human scientists and soldiers worked at computers and weapons that had once belonged to the Valthians. "Today we stop being victims," General Lee announced to his people. "Today we become the hunters." Dr. Yoon Min held up a small glass container filled with clear liquid. It looked harmless, like water, but it was the most dangerous weapon ever created by human hands. "This will kill every Valthian it touches," she said. "It will spread through their quantum networks like fire through dry grass." The biological weapon was designed to be perfect. It would kill Valthians quickly, but could not harm any other living thing. Dr. Yoon had spent months making sure it would only target the parasitic creatures that had destroyed so many worlds. But the humans were not content to just free Earth. They had found the locations of the other 17 species' homeworlds using stolen Valthian star maps. Most of these worlds were dead now, but some still had survivors hiding in underground shelters waiting to die. "We're not just fighting for Earth," General Lee said. "We're fighting for every species these monsters have ever hurt." Major Kim Taeho volunteered to lead the most dangerous mission of all, a strike on the Valthian homeworld itself. Using a captured Valthian ship, Kim and his team traveled across the galaxy to the heart of the alien empire. What they found there was worse than anything they had imagined. The Valthian homeworld was not a planet at all. It was a massive artificial structure built around a dying star, covered in processing facilities that stretched as far as the eye could see. For thousands of years, the Valthians had been bringing the genetic material of conquered species to this place, turning entire civilizations into raw materials for their empire. "It's a factory," Kim reported back to Earth through the quantum communication system. "A factory for making more of these parasites. They've been doing this for so long that they've forgotten what their original planet even looked like." Kim's team planted biological weapons throughout the Valthian facility. The weapons were designed to spread through the air and through the quantum networks that connected every part of the alien empire. Once released, there would be no stopping them. On Earth, Dr. Yoon stood before a massive communication array that had been built from captured Valthian technology. She was about to send a message that would reach every corner of the galaxy, transmitted through the very networks the Valthians had used to coordinate their empire. "This is Dr. Yoon Minna of the planet Earth," she said into the microphone. "We are broadcasting to any survivors of the 17 species that were destroyed by the Valthians. We know what they did to you. We know about the pain and suffering you have endured. We have not forgotten you, and we are coming to help." The message was translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast on every frequency. On distant worlds, in hidden bunkers and underground shelters, the last survivors of dead civilizations heard the message and began to hope for the first time in generations. Commander Park Sora, who had once worked on the International Space Station, now commanded a fleet of captured Valthian ships. These vessels had been modified by human engineers and loaded with liberation forces. Their mission was to free the breeding facilities, where the Valthians were still holding prisoners from the conquered worlds. The first facility they reached was on a planet that had once been home to a species called the Zephyrians. These beings had been peaceful traders who had welcomed the Valthians as friends, just as humans had done. Now the survivors were kept in horrific conditions, their bodies used as incubators for Valthian young. When Commander Park's ships arrived, the Zephyrian survivors thought they were seeing another Valthian trick. But when human soldiers broke down the doors of their prison cells, speaking words of freedom in their own language, the survivors began to weep with joy. "We are humans from Earth," the soldiers said. "We are here to take you home." The biological weapon spread faster than anyone had expected. It traveled through the quantum networks that connected every Valthian facility, every ship, every communication relay. The parasites began dying within hours of exposure, their stolen bodies collapsing as the virus destroyed their alien physiology. On the Valthian homeworld, Major Kim watched as the massive processing facilities began to shut down. The creatures that had operated them for thousands of years were dying, their quantum networks carrying the weapon to every corner of their empire. "The networks are collapsing," Kim reported to Earth. "Their whole civilization is shutting down. It's working." Within a week, the Valthian Empire was gone. The quantum networks that had once carried their commands across the galaxy now carried only silence. The creatures that had destroyed 17 civilizations had been wiped out by the survivors of their 18th intended victim. Dr. Yoon stood in the ruins of Seoul, looking up at the sky where Valthian ships had once darkened the sun. Now those ships were falling from orbit, their crews dead, their threat ended forever. "It's over," she said to General Lee. "We won." Even as she spoke, she knew that victory was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, there were survivors to rescue, worlds to rebuild, and a new future to create. The humans had become the guardians of the galaxy, whether they wanted to or not. The species that had expected kindness from Earth had received retribution instead, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since the last Valthian ship fell from Earth's sky. Admiral Lee Dong-ho stood on the bridge of the flagship Terra's Vengeance, looking out at a galaxy that was finally free from the parasites that had terrorized it for thousands of years. The quantum networks that had once carried Valthian commands now carried human voices, coordinating the rescue of survivors across 17 dead worlds. "Admiral, we're receiving another distress signal," reported Captain Choi Hyun-sik from the communication station. "It's from the Altair system." "More survivors found hiding in underground bunkers," Lee nodded grimly. Every week brought new discoveries. Small groups of beings who had somehow survived the Valthian genocide by hiding in caves, abandoned mines, or forgotten space stations. Some had been hiding for over a century, living in constant fear that the parasites would find them. The Terran protection fleet now consisted of over 1,000 ships. Most of them captured Valthian vessels that had been modified by human engineers. Where once these ships had carried death across the galaxy, they now carried hope. Human crews worked alongside survivors from the 17 species, teaching them to use their former oppressors' technology for good purposes. Dr. Yoon Minna had become the director of the Restoration Project, the most important mission humanity had ever undertaken. In laboratories scattered across dozens of worlds, she and her team worked to help the survivors rebuild their civilizations. But the task was more difficult than anyone had imagined. Many of them have forgotten who they were, Dr. Yoon explained. To Admiral Lee, during one of their weekly meetings, the Valthians didn't just destroy their bodies, they destroyed their cultures, languages, their entire sense of identity. Some species have been enslaved for so long that they don't even remember their own names. On the world that had once been called Zephyria, Dr. Yoon worked with a group of survivors who had been freed from a Valthian breeding facility. These beings had once been master artists and philosophers, but generations of oppression had reduced them to frightened, broken creatures who spoke only in whispers. "We are trying to help them remember their art," Dr. Yoon said to her assistant, Dr. Park Jinwoo, who had become her closest collaborator. "We found fragments of their sculptures and paintings in the ruins of their cities. Slowly, some of them are beginning to remember." The work was slow and heartbreaking. Dr. Yoon watched as a Zephyrian survivor named Kala touched a piece of ancient sculpture that had been recovered from her homeworld. Suddenly, the female began to weep, her hands moving as if they remembered how to shape clay. For the first time in decades, she spoke in her native language instead of the broken words the Valthians had taught her. But not all the galaxy's reaction to humanity's victory was positive. The humans had saved countless lives, but they had done so by completely destroying an entire species. Some of the surviving civilizations were grateful, but others were afraid of what humanity might do next. Commander Park Sora, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, faced these concerns every day. The Council met in a space station built from the ruins of the Valthian homeworld, constant reminder of what happened to those who chose to be predators rather than protectors. "The Corvani delegation is concerned about human military expansion," Commander Park reported to Admiral Lee. "They're grateful that we saved them, but they're worried that we might become the next threat to galactic peace." Admiral Lee understood. Their fears, the Terran Protection Fleet, was the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships patrolled star systems that had been free for the first time in centuries. Human soldiers stood guard at the entrances to rebuild cities, their weapons ready to defend against any threat. "We didn't ask to become the galaxy's police force," Lee said. "But someone has to make sure this never happens again." The truth was that humanity had changed during the war against the Valthians. The species that had once dreamed of peaceful exploration among the stars had become something harder, more ruthless. They had learned that sometimes the greatest kindness was the willingness to be completely merciless to those who would harm the innocent. Dr. Yoon saw this change in herself and her colleagues every day. She had once been a gentle scientist who studied alien life forms with wonder and curiosity. Now she was the creator of the most effective biological weapon in galactic history, a virus that had wiped out an entire species in a matter of weeks. "Do you ever regret what we did?" Dr. Park asked her one evening as they watched the sunset over New Zephyria, the first city rebuilt by the survivors with human help. Dr. Yoon was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it was necessary," she said finally. "Doing it, the Valthians made their choice when they decided to become parasites. We made ours when we decided to stop them." The galaxy was entering a new age, the age of human protection. Some civilizations welcomed it with open arms, grateful to have guardians who would fight for them. Others watched nervously as human ships patrolled their borders, wondering if their saviors might one day become their conquerors. But humanity had learned something important from their war against the Valthians. They had learned that good intentions were not enough. They had learned that sometimes peace could only be maintained through the threat of overwhelming force. They had learned that the greatest kindness was sometimes the promise of swift and terrible retribution to those who would harm thee. Innocent, the Valthians had expected kindness from Earth. They had received retribution instead. Now the galaxy would remember that lesson for generations to come.